we were talking a little bit backstage about what's going on in the news. I've been reading a bit about Comcast, and I figured that you must have, you and Jeff Immelt must have finished the NBC deal back in the...
It's all done.
In the green. It's all done?
No.
I know you can't talk about it. I know that you have to say no comment, and then it's my job to try to, make you say something anyways, and I'll do my best. But maybe I could ask a question this way, which is, what is it about the content business that is interesting to Comcast? You've been building a steady suite of content services over the past 10 or so years. I mean, many people may not know, but Comcast owns, or majority owns, PBS Sprout, the children's, which is a big favorite in my house, Channel 119.
Delighted to hear it. Thank you.
So you've been building assets in content, regardless of whether or not NBC Universal becomes one of them. What's the draw there? Are you concerned or are you diversifying revenues against, the future of?
Well, I'll tell you, I appreciate the way you're asking the question, because you're right. I really can't comment on any specific situation. I think you can understand that. So talking, why do we like the cable programming business? We've been in the, as many of you know, my father started Comcast. It's a great American, only in America kind of situation 40 years ago when he was, or 45 years ago, and he was over 40 years old when he started the company.
He had a belt and cufflinks business.
Yep.
And he decided that those pants that didn't have belts was
the internet of his day.
Was the internet.
Think about it.
Those polyester pants, right?
I don't think I would be here if we were still in the men's belt business. Nobody would want to hear anything. And so I feel, first of all, very lucky that he had the vision to wire up part of America that Comcast had and start a company. And even the name Comcast back in 1963 was communications and broadcasting. He kind of saw it going places at a time when it was just a wire trying to get you an antenna.
Is it true that he made the decision to buy that first cable franchise after a poker game?
Second one. Only I don't know. You never ask your father these real questions. But the lore is he was in Tupelo, Mississippi, which is the birthplace of the first cable system for Comcast, also the birthplace of Elvis Presley. And then he was supposedly at some event like that, maybe a crap game, and somebody said Meridian is going to be sold tomorrow if you want to go get it. And he has a real entrepreneur. I think similar to probably almost everybody in this room, wanted to work for himself, wanted to start his own business, or associate himself with a company that was growing. So to get to your question, if you go back in history, just two decades, Ted Turner came along with that same passion and took the first generation of cable and said, okay, let's have just cable programming. And today's world, as we know, and we'll talk about here, it's changing so fast, but at its essence, people want to get connected to content that they love. And the content that they love, as they have more ways to connect, you can make a case is going to grow in value and is going to be a very healthy business. You can certainly make other cases, and all pieces of content in the food chain are not equal, but the one that is specifically our experience, we own E! Entertainment and Style Network in addition to PBS Sprout and the Golf Channel, and Comcast Sportsnet and a number of other channels. And every time we've gone in, we've seen many good things happen to that business. So if there is an opportunity, whether it's the one you're talking about or any other opportunity, our philosophy is it's prudent to think about it, look at it, and beyond that, you really, you just have to wait and see if it's the right situation. But why do we like that business? Because it has two sources of revenues. It has a subscription fee and an advertising, so that there's a very healthy business, even if advertising goes up and down, as we've seen lately. And at the same time, the distribution capabilities to create more and more channels and more content on whether it's wireless devices or on the internet, they can be at the heart of that. And if you can find a way to have a subscription business and an advertising business, I think you have something very special, and that's worked out for the last 20 years, and I think it will work out in the future.
There's been, the cable business, I mean, there's a lot to talk about, and particularly I think it's fair to say that the internet industry, if I can be the proxy for the folks in the room a bit, has always felt like the cable business was potentially a dead duck, because once the internet got to everybody, who needed to pay a fee to the cable company for content, because content was sort of going to be everywhere, and then YouTube sort of proved that there was video content out there, and then there was, let's fast forward to where we are right now. You are now the largest ISP or provider of internet service in the United States.
Residentially.
Residentially, yeah. Right. And so which part of that business do you see emerging of your ISP business and your cable subscription business, and how does that work in terms of your revenues and your cash flows?
Well, today, give or take, 50% is the video business, 35% is the internet business, approximately, and now we're in the phone business and the advertising business and commercial services, some transactions on demand, high def, DVRs. So I don't think that we can control the answer to that embedded in all that question. What I think we're in the business is delivering to homes and hopefully to consumers the best experience imaginable. And if they want to, how they pay for it will evolve over time, and you bet on having the best pipe. That would be the place to start. We want the best pipe backed up with great service, so in total we give the best experience. And I think we've done that since the beginning of the company. We had more analog channels when you could only get broadcast. We have more digital channels. At one moment in time, a competitor will come along and it'll push us to go faster. So right now, we have, I think, the best on-demand of any provider out there with 10,000 shows, and we have the best high-def on-demand with several thousand choices. And then we have the fastest internet. And I believe there will be a need for some content companies to say, I need to pay $5 million an episode to make that show. I need a revenue that is more than just advertising. And there will be others that say, I produced my content for less than $5 million, or whatever the numbers might be, or my movie for $100 million. And what we want to do is create a relationship with the consumer and a relationship with the content partner and say, you figure this out, we're here to help translate that. If you want to make it a free service, if you want to have different windows. So earlier windows you pay, later windows you don't pay as much, or you don't pay at all extra. We want to use technology, and I want to show something here later this afternoon of our vision of how you can pay once, consume everywhere. So this is going to change, but the fundamental core of what we're strategy, we'll spend $5 billion in capital spending this year on top of $5.5 billion last year, on top of $6 billion the year before, putting out, for instance, DOCSIS 3.0.
So the DOCSIS is data over cable. This is the standard by which...
If this room doesn't understand DOCSIS 3.0, we're in big trouble. But DOCSIS 3.0, put simply, is up to 100 megabits a second. We will have rolled that out to over 65% of the company this year, and frankly, we don't have a business plan for how to pay for it. And it's cost a lot of money.
So you've put in tens of billions, or 15 or so billion dollars, and you're not sure what...
Well, it wasn't all that for DOCSIS 3.0. I'm not going to say that. We spent, that is what our total capital spending is, putting in DVRs in your house, putting in phone...
And then swapping them when they bust.
And swapping them when they bust, and coming out in the trucks to do that. And it's a very long-term relationship with belief that you're going to use these products 10 and 20 years from now, one way or the other. You're going to want the best in and out of your house. And I'll give you an example. The last time this happened, about 13, I'm trying to think how many years ago, but 12, 13 years ago, we were visiting Microsoft, and Bill Gates said to everyone in cable land, I believe your two-way business will be bigger than your one-way business. And frankly, most of the room didn't know what he was talking about. And ultimately, there wasn't really an Internet 1.0. It was just, and we took DOCSIS 1.0, we're now DOCSIS 3.0, and did data over cable. And today, it's almost half the company.
Right.
And it's clearly changed everything in broadband. And then one day, we went and had right here at a couple blocks away at a cable convention at the Moscone Center, first time I met Eric Schmidt. And he said, I just switched to Comcast, which of course I said, well, you tell everybody, so that's why I'm telling everybody. But this is a few years ago. And
he said that's because DSL was too slow. And
exactly. And then and then he said, by the way, 85% of all of Google's searches go over broadband. Thank you very much for building broadband.
Right.
And Xbox
That's
Live.
what he said to Steve Jobs for the iPhone too.
Yeah, and Xbox Live, which if you haven't experienced a kid who really, really lives, my son just went to college as a freshman this year, and I said, how are you going to stay in touch with all these guys you've been friends with since kindergarten? We're all at the same school. He said, oh, we're all staying in touch through Xbox Live. My daughter, it's all through Facebook, and for him, it's we get on there and we play NHL, and we're all talking on our headsets, and so all of that's enabled because we went to DOCSIS 1. So if I had one goal out of this discussion today from Comcast's selfish perspective, it's we're going to keep investing. And because we believe there are great ideas in this room and in this country and in the world to take 50 megabits or 100 megabits of speed and say, my dream can't happen as well or at all unless you deliver that to a home. And the same way as it's unthinkable that a Google or a Yahoo or a Facebook or a Twitter wouldn't really be happening if we hadn't made those investments 15 years ago, we think we're right at that place right now.
Now, I did a little research. The U.S. average right now, I mean, we'll talk about DOCSIS 3.0 and the 50 megabit speed, and I can't wait to have it. But right now, the average speed is about 5.1 megabits. It's about 15 years behind, according to the CTWA, 15 years behind South Korea and Japan. Why is that? Why is it that the U.S., which has spawned such amazing companies, so far behind in broadband adoption compared to other parts of the world?
I think that that's just not true. I'll start by saying that we were in Japan last year. We talked to the Japanese internet provider that offered 50 megabits. He said, I offer 50 megabits for 1 second. That's my 50 megabits a second. They have the same equipment, the same wires, the same infrastructure. Why is the adoption different is a different question. It's not the availability, and I don't think it's the lack of speed. I think we have 97% availability in the United States, or some very high percentage. Yes, there is a significant population that's rural, that is a different conversation. But you get into digital literacy, you get into what language is it in, you get into do you have the right PC or PC at all, or the economics. But I don't believe it's the infrastructure providers haven't done as well as over in. And South Korea, of course, is a slightly unique situation because it's one, in Seoul you have many skyscrapers, and so you can, it's a different topography and a different situation. But I really think America is too hard on ourselves on the question of whether we are investing and whether we're having availability. And I think we should be really being honest with ourselves and say, okay, in urban Washington, D.C., or urban Philadelphia, where I live, why is the penetration half of what it is in suburban Lower Merion, Pennsylvania, or suburban Virginia? And get into education and get into what are the needs and services, what's available on the internet, what government services are out there. So I think it's a very legitimate thing for the new administration to focus on.
And I want to get to some of that.
But just try to go and say, okay, we don't have fast enough internet, we're 15 years behind. I just don't fundamentally believe that's true.
Well, so DOCSIS is, as you say, you can buy tiers of up to 50 megabits per second.
Right, and we have it out here now in the Bay Area.
It's here in the Bay Area, 22 down, or 10 and 5, which is still faster than certainly what we had before. Are you concerned, I mean, I want to maybe segue to what you want to show, about this idea of, and I brought it up a bit before, of cord cutting. And the idea that, well, and in this, I mean, how many out here have Apple TV or some form of television that is not cable sorry.
That's
he's
okay.
write down some names there.
No.
But I think that there is this sense that, hey, number one, I want to buy the shows I want to buy, a la iTunes, right? I don't want to have to subscribe to a big fire hose where I watch 2% of what I possibly can. And the internet should provide me that kind of choice, and I think particularly this audience may have that philosophy. So what's your response to that idea of cord cutting, and maybe that's a segue to what you want to show?
Okay, well, first of all, so far the data does not suggest that people in mass want to do that. It doesn't mean I don't want to supplement my experience with an additional Apple type product or a TiVo product or a Sling product or whatever is the hot idea of the year. And one of the things we want to do as Comcast is sort of have a philosophical mind shift to welcome and embrace that world. And I think let's come back and talk about that. But if you just specifically say, okay, every show is on the internet, and we know that's what consumers would like to have happen. What can we do to help bridge that? So let me pull up a demo of something that...
Johnny, can we get that cued?
And this won't take very long, and this is a set of I just want to show you something. We have a beta going on right now, and we're going to launch this nationally by the end of this year. So this is our Fancast site, which some of you are familiar with. And if you scroll down, you'll see that Fancast is, our version of what some other sites have, where you can get the latest shows, you can get information, you can drill in. Let's go back up, and it's got thousands and thousands of choices. We also have a store. And
they have everything that's on your cable subscription?
No, because different content companies decide to put the stuff out there, but we have...
so it doesn't have what Hulu has?
It has, since you mentioned that, it has everything and then some.
I had to.
Yeah, I don't believe...
Who knows, you may end up owning half of Hulu at some point.
I believe that it's got lots and lots of site, and everything is free, okay? And it's an advertising-supported site. It's available anywhere. It's got over 9 million uniques. It's doing terrifically well. But here's one of the reasons we invested in this and wanted to be one of the first cable companies, and I've gone on a lot of panels and said, I think video over the net is friend, not foe. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way we're managing our company. So we made a large investment in video over the net here in one of the best sites, and I won't go too deep into it. So now if you go to the trial, several thousand people, up to over 5,000, I think, offered this trial, and they're using it. You would log in once, okay? So we made this, John, in a fictitious site.
Is that going to stay live
No,
after the show?
No, that's not.
Damn.
So we click on, and you'll notice the first subtle thing that's changed. And this in the real working thousands of users happens in a matter of a second or two. So there's all of what we do is a plumbing, which isn't by this room's standards necessarily the hardest technical hoops to jump through. We have to have a system, which we've now been developing for several years, which is to take all of your entitlements as a customer of Comcast. So in this particular case, you have HBO, Starz, Cinemax, and we have now 22, 24 content companies who are now participating with us. First thing that changed is Wally popped up, not CSI, because CSI was available free nationally. Wally is, I believe, a Starz movie, and is only now, because you happen to have Starz, it would change the experience, much as many sites on the web do, with knowledge of who you are. So your entitlements have now, you've been authenticated. And as we go through this, and we can scroll down, and we offer TV episodes. Let's go back up, and we'll just jump into movies. I'll make this move fast. So if you go to full movies, we have 1,000 movies. Many of them, now you'll notice the little key has shown up. This is, again, just a beta. The final version, which is going to launch by the end of this year, will look completely different than this. But the little key is only there because you have already got a subscription, which, by the way, 90% of America has either got cable, satellite, who is really in the broadband space. So everybody has some set of entitlements, or almost everybody has something right now. And so you then go back up, we can go to full, you can see just lots and lots of choices. We're going to give you different ways to search and recommendations, and you go to full TV episodes again. So we have Turner, you can see some of our partners on the right. We have...
So, I mean, but this, if you tell me if I've got this wrong, but this feels like a replication with a web sort of skin of the cable model. In other words, if you've subscribed to cable, now online you can get... we're
going to call this, at least working, we publicly said, on demand, online. To your point, you can basically now access, and let's jump down and just show you how it would work. Let's go to Entourage, except it's so much better than your TV experience. So here's an example of why that's the case. Because we're not bound by the storage in your box or bound by the storage in just the head end, we're in the web world. Here's every episode of Entourage ever, all seasons.
So this is like, video on
Nirvana.
demand. Video on demand on steroids.
Video on demand on steroids. And then we're also looking at the cross-platform functionality. So if you wanted to jump over, you'll see in the right-hand column, yes, you can play it in the middle, but if you wanted to watch it on your TV, our remote DVR function, which is going to be up in many of our markets by the end of this year, and will be part of this when we launch in some of those markets, you would be able to then set your DVR to say, this is I didn't have that episode. If it's available, I'd like to watch it on my TV, not on my PC.
So now you've integrated the DVR with the web, which is one of the gripes of...
One of the gripes and one of the opportunities. And then, of course, if you go in and you say, let's play it, you'll see that it's a great player. It gives you a full screen experience. And you can't do this today anywhere on the web. So this is going to be available to every Comcast HBO customer by the end of this year. And we're going to be the first to do that, coupled with every other piece of content that's out there, all in either one site or one experience.
So you're going to curate the rest of the web as well?
Well, the programmers are all excited to say, if you're authenticated, and you put in your password, and we now know it's you, and you're one of our customers, we want to enable you to be able to do this from anywhere, and that you have access to this capability. And so, if you're a satellite customer or a phone customer, not a cable customer, the programmers are going to want that too. So that's great. That's the model we see. So I think this is trying to take a big step forward in giving the consumer what they want. I just want to be able to watch Entourage right now. I've already bought the subscription. I don't want to have to pay extra for each show. Now maybe the producers of Entourage want to make a show that's not yet available on TV and it's a special episode and charge extra. That's their option. So our job is to create a technology. We laid out a vision for the company beginning of last year called Project Infinity. And the vision was real simple. First of all, our goal in trying to stick to what I said earlier is to have more than anybody else has, so it's hard to beat infinity. So any piece of content, wherever it wants to live, the content owner can choose how they want it to reach the consumer, and we create, whether it's huge on demand, we're going to go to 20,000 choices, we're up from 10,000 a day. Let me just plug, while we've been all focused on the internet, an amazing thing has happened on the TV. Comcast made a big investment in on-demand. We now have had 13 billion television shows ordered on demand just in our footprint. That's twice of all of iTunes music videos downloaded since, and we've all heard lots and lots about 13 billion TV shows.
Let me just ask you about iTunes. Do you fear Apple?
I think, I think Apple's an amazing company, and you'd be not doing your job if you didn't think about all the possible scenarios. But I've met with Apple and Steve Jobs and their leadership, half a dozen times in the last several years, is figure out how can we work together, how do we make Apple TV a great experience, because you need a great broadband experience in order for Apple TV to work, and yet we have things that are live that they don't have, and it's the same thing we said when Microsoft said this two-way world is your defining difference between satellite.
Well, that was a big deal for you back then when Microsoft invested, what was it, $1 billion in Comcast?
And the data business
it worked
has never
out well
been,
for Bill Gates.
Usually does.
Can I swap gears for a second here? I want to talk about N squared as opposed to web squared, net neutrality. The new chairman of the FCC, who sends his regrets because he was planning on coming but he couldn't, recently outlined his views on the idea of net neutrality. There are 4 principles that have been adopted as sort of non-binding principles around net neutrality, and he recently suggested, or strongly suggested, they should be adopted as actual policy, as rules. What do you make of that? And what is your view of what is a pretty loaded and sometimes ill-defined term, net neutrality?
Well, I think you just hit my number one point, which is tell me exactly what it means and what problem we're solving that requires an act of government, and I can give you a very specific reaction. I think it means a lot of things, unlike some of the things you've said where there may be general consensus. I think this has a very different meaning to a lot of different people. That said, we have a brand new chair of the FCC, very, very capable, very smart, very likable, and I take him, and I think a lot of people do, at his word, which is he's going to be very fact-driven and very open and transparent, and is beginning the process to ask a lot of questions to see what's working, what's not working, what could be fixed. The idea that we're not going to have an open internet is just not realistic. We have an open internet. It's been incredibly successful. The fact that we're talking, let's take your other point, which is we're behind the rest of the world. I may not share that view of where we are relative, but I don't think we would disagree on what it's going to take to stay relative and stay ahead. And I think that's going to take, by the FCC's own estimate, $350 billion collectively to be spent to go to the next generation of, we call it wideband from broadband, or wherever we're headed next, 4G wireless and others. And how much regulation comes in? Does that stifle investment? What principles need to be maintained to make sure there's not abuses? We welcome that conversation, but the Washington Post editorial came out, day after they started this proceeding and said, what problem are we fixing? And let's make sure we aren't, that there's a reason that that's happening. And that's, I think, the right question, and that's where we should begin.
Well, I mean, you have an absolute, there's very few companies who have not signed in a sort of open letter saying we support this move. Google, Twitter, Facebook, a lot, I'm not sure if it's Facebook, I'll ask Cheryl later, but a lot of Valley companies have basically said we support it. So clearly there are smart people who are saying, we're afraid that those who have the pipes may give preference to some packets where there's more profit for them than packets where there's profit for the other guys, the Googles.
But we heard that same thing 5 years ago. We've heard it 10 years ago. And so what is it? And I think that we welcome that discussion, that scrutiny, and we're going to be an active participant. And hopefully, again, if I had another goal in talking in this dialogue, it would be how many of your businesses running over somebody's platform, and that platform, you want it to be reinvested in, you want a healthy return, you want those companies not to crap out, and you at the same time don't want some of the horribles that you just mentioned. But every time the few limited examples, including our own, that have gotten notoriety for usually get dealt with in like 10 seconds, and changes get made, because this is new technology, and usually by the time the government comes along, the problem that was there, we're on to the next iteration of things. And so there are unintended consequences, and I just personally
you're not a big fan of that
Well,
move.
I think that you probably couldn't have one definition of what all those companies signed on to. What is it?
Right.
And if it's the right it, we're signing on too. If it's, and I'm hopeful that that's what's going to happen after the dialogue and all the work that the FCC is doing, and we want to be a constructive partner in that conversation.
So I think what you mentioned, I'm not sure if you were referring to, there was sort of a dust-up a while back around bandwidth capping, and that was seen as potentially one execution of the control over the platform, so to speak. But it strikes me that maybe you have a different view of that.
Well, I think...
I mean, is that kind of not really an issue anymore once you start going to 50 or 100 megabits per second, or is it always going to be that there's some people who are pushing?
We have, look, one half of 1% use up 25-30% of the bandwidth. I think all of us want to have a great experience. You were talking about the average speed. The goal is to make it faster, and there needs to be some ability to do that, and at the same time be very very transparent and very fair in how you're doing that. I was actually referring to something else, but that's okay.
Oh, we don't have to bring up every
Exactly.
time Comcast has been in the news. There's a lot we could. I want to give time for Q&A. The mics are right here. Please come up and ask questions. And while folks are coming up, I wanted to ask you about something that I actually think you've been in the news in a good way around, which is your use of particularly social networking and Twitter in particular to sort of change the view of your brand, which is that I think you would acknowledge that the brand has taken some dings around service over the past couple of decades, and that's built up. And people started to complain quite vociferously on Facebook and Twitter and so on. And you guys did something different about that, which is you actually started responding and fixing things. Was this a decision you made proactively, or did you watch it happen and go, that's smart, and I'm going to allow that to occur and encourage it?
The latter. I will definitely not say that I had that idea. But I will say it's fascinating for me to watch how quickly you can change a company.
So has this really changed the culture of the company?
I think so. First of all, not just that, but to the point you made, you have to acknowledge we grew very fast. We added internet, we added phone, we added on-demand, we added high-def channels, and the boxes didn't always work, and we have 300 million phone calls a year we take. So,
and how many of those are happy?
So if you get 99% right, 3 million.
I mean, when they first call.
3 million are unhappy. So
right.
You're right. So you start with, okay, how do you change that? That's a really big operation. And use of social networking and use of transparency and letting the customer have more power has been fantastic for us. We have famous Frank, we call him in our shop.
Frank Elias.
He now has 11 people. We've taken 100,000 of those folks and customers and instantaneously been able to talk to them in a different kind of dialogue than calling our office. At the same time, we had to make the network reliable. The box is more reliable. We've, the growth, that first triple play that surged, everybody wanted to get the triple play. We've sold 25% of the company, economy got slower. We are making significant progress on all parts of it, but a big part of that turnaround, in my opinion, and it's a journey, it's not complete, but the focus is being pushed from inside the organization, not just top down. Everybody wants to go to that cocktail party and say, my Comcast is really working, thank you. And that's not going to happen that often because that's just the nature of the business we're in. But we're listening and we're caring, and I think we're making some progress.
Well, Frank fixed my Comcast via
Frank.
Twitter, so and I didn't pull any strings.
And he's probably listening right now, so thank you, Frank.
Is that Stuart?
Yeah, Stuart. So Brian, I'm a Comcast customer, so I'd like to ask you kind of a customer service question. I have to because I like that John's my straight man in this case, because I have to say that in the 5 years I've been a Comcast customer, your customer service has improved people that I deal with are knowledgeable and do what they say they're going to do. But I moved into my house last year, just over a year ago, and I became a triple play customer, so I do have all three items. And I went through a very complex calculation with their customer service people and came to the conclusion that the best bundle I could get when I moved in was at about the rate of about $155 a month. And I recently got a notice from Comcast, actually a phone call, very nice lady who informed me that my bundle had expired and that they now had a new bundle to replace that, and that the new price would be $185 a month, so an increase of about 15%. And then I got my first bill with a flyer in it that said that I was saving $85 a month. And so I'm sitting there thinking, wow, $185 plus $85, that's a lot of money. So I'd like to know kind of what can I expect as a customer, and a loyal customer and a happy customer going forward in terms of that bill that I might be getting from you every month. Is it going to go up by another 15% a year? And are you going to still claim to be saving me $80 or $90 or $100 a month?
Okay, well, you got me in a tough spot here.
Meet Stuart.
Everybody's services obviously are different. You probably have a bunch of digital television, high def, and some DVRs, I hope. The price, where I think we're at, I mean, I don't quite know what's in that question, but the reality is, I hope we can provide you in a different experience 5 years from now than what you're getting today, that you value higher, and that will convince you. You have more choices than you've ever had. The point I wanted to go back to earlier was openness and looking at iPhone. You talked about Apple and how everybody is just blown away by the success of the iPhone apps. And the number one iPhone app in TV space for TV scheduling is called, I think it's i.tv, and we take all our on-demand and give it to them. It's not our app, because we see the world changing. And the openness of our architecture and our platform has to change, which is what we laid out as part of the Project Infinity vision. And we see where the world wants to go. So we want to give you, long run, an experience that you'd say, yes,
wants to justify that 15%
once I would like
increase.
to, except that 15 is not realistic and not what we're doing everywhere, and so that's why I don't know your specifics. But on general, our video prices went up 2.5% this year, I think. We hadn't had a broadband price increase in 5 years, yet we've quadrupled the speed or more over those 5 years. And last point I'd make, there's more competition. When you look at the government question we just discussed a minute ago, big picture, I'm not an economist. You either have regulation or you have competition. To me, those are the two roads. And about 15 years ago, they passed a law to put us on the competition road, hence DirecTV, Dish Network, now the Bells with UVerse and Fios, and wireless and the web. And in my opinion, that's the road we're on. And if someone's going to take a lot of money from you every month, they're going to have to give you great service, an ever-improving product, and a great brand. And those are things we're working on very hard. But we thank you for your business.
I want to give that we're running late, but I'm going to let this run late, Johnny, if that's okay, so that we can get a couple more quick questions in.
Okay, Don Dodge from Microsoft, and I'm also a happy Comcast customer.
This is a good audience. I thank you.
I had the same experience as Stuart, but I'm happy to pay more money. It was not a problem. It's great service. What I'm interested in is true two-way. I saw you 2 years ago at CES introduce true two-way and all these amazing devices, televisions and DVRs, portable DVRs. I'm still waiting. I'd love to pay for it, but when's it coming?
Well, I think we're on the road, and I think we have some good and some bad from where all the things we thought that would happen with true two-way. The TV manufacturers, some of them, they change so fast that they don't necessarily they can't build into the TV as much as you can build into a box. So there was a little bit of a realization from just a TV with no box. Well, it gets obsoleted. What are we going to do? Whereas box or software allows you to stay current. So we have true two-way pretty much all rolled out across the Comcast footprint. In terms of putting it in our own boxes, We're making progress to have that. We have a commitment to get to something like 20% of our boxes, I think this year, next year, but I think very soon. I believe it's part of the true vision of where we got to go, which is an open platform, so you can have folks like Microsoft and others developing apps for us. We also see IPTV, coming along, and so do many others. So a lot of investment is going in different pockets of what that platform should be. We also have a set of interactive applications on a great platform that's real easy for programmers to use called eBIF. So my Uber answer here, not to, happy to follow up, is specifically we need interactivity. Satellite can't do that, so we have a selfish motivation as to why we want these interactive apps. We want third parties developing them. We see the success with others. And we're taking a legacy business of 40 years of boxes and history and setups and bringing it to modernization is job one. And if you guys can help us do it faster, that's going to make us aware.
Dan's from Microsoft. He'd love to give you an operating system.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that Chris?
Hey, John.
Hey.
Hey, Brian. Also, an ecstatically happy customer. Great job.
That's the filter before you get to ask
I did not
the question.
set this up, all right? You're making me look bad.
I had to troubleshoot John's system a couple of times, but I think that has more to do with him than your service. So,
That's not unusual, by the way. It's not always our fault. But
so I know he's totally embarrassed now. The other service I have is this little device here. And one question I had for you is my friends on the East Coast, they're Cablevision subscribers, are raving about the, I guess now 20,000 Wi-Fi nodes that Cablevision has deployed, where they can now get all of the Cablevision services that they get in their home now on these wonderful devices over Wi-Fi. When is Comcast going to give us ubiquitous coverage of Wi-Fi?
you're holding up an iPhone, I take it? I can't quite see. The lights are bright.
Or Android or anyone.
Understood. We are very excited, and we haven't made a public announcement to that question, so I'm not going to do it today. But let's just say we see the same excitement from our broadband customers being able to port. It's very consistent with the vision of what I just showed you with on-demand online. And we have a fascinating investment in Clearwire, which is building 4G. We have the ability to put Wi-Fi in all of our CMTSs and EMTAs and on poles. And this is a big part of our future. And I think that enabling these devices to be open and working and synced up and seamless with our triple play is a big part of the company's vision. And I'm glad your Cablevision experience is that good, because usually that's the nice thing. It gets developed in one, it can get rolled out everywhere.
So I unfortunately have to cut this off because we run very late. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for coming. I hope you'll come back and give us an update. And please join me in thanking Brian.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
Good deal.